What's up guys, welcome back to Tech World EX. Today I'm going to be reacting to the Verge's PC build guide because one of my friends suggested it as I was shorthanded on video ideas. But I have a really great video coming up next week. It just took a bit longer than planned. And also I'm going to be streaming tomorrow the Samsung Galaxy Unpacked event, so tune in at 7 a.m. Pacific if you want to see that. And also I'm going to be posting a tech news thing later this week, so if you want to see that, stay tuned. With all that said, let's get into the video.
So a few years ago, TC, or Managing Editor, built a gaming desktop, but it's kind of out of date, and it's definitely not going to hold up for Battlefield 5. So let's build a new one. You can build a gaming desktop for around $1,000, but I want to go all out, so I spent around $2,000. PC like...
If you guys are getting into it, you could literally just spend $500, but yeah.
This is going to be able to play most games at ultra settings. So, what do you need to build a desktop? Well, of course, first you need a table. Preferably not metal. If it's going to be metal, have an anti-static working surface layered on top of it, a thermal paste applicator, an Allen wrench, some tweezers to tighten up the wires, a Swiss Army knife.
Okay, well, 3 things. Number 1, I've never used a thermal paste applicator ever, and I've built like 10 PCs. I've never also used an Allen wrench, and those are not tweezers, they're zip ties. But like, let's continue, I guess.
Which hopefully has a Phillips head screwdriver in it.
And
it
hopefully
last but not
okay,
least, an anti-static bracelet, which is to protect you and the parts. These are the parts you're going to need, but more importantly, before we get there...
I hate to keep stopping it, but that's not an anti-static bracelet. That's like a rubber band.
We need to understand what these parts are doing and how they interact with one another. To better understand the parts that make up a desktop, let's try to understand them individually. The processor is like the computer's brain, a base of calculations that control everything the computer does. The motherboard is like the foundation, serving as a main structure for all other parts to be added to. It also allows the other parts to communicate with one another, which also makes it kind of like a nervous system. Graphics cards are responsible for rendering and processing visuals into what you see on screen. Our PC's power supply is of course channeling electricity, in that it adjusts and provides the right amount of energy to keep it running. Last but not least, RAM, or random access memory, and your hard drive are good examples of short-term and long-term memory, respectively. If you want to...
This part seems all okay. That's a decent, like, lowdown on what the parts are.
Better understand what kind of computer to build, then first figure out what you want to use it for. A gamer might care more about a graphics card than, say, a video editor, who might want extra RAM to assist with editing large files. If you're building a budget build for video streaming, say under $1,000, you want to focus on parts like a Core i5 or Core i3 processor.
Don't get a Core i3 or 5 if you're spending, get like a Ryzen chip, but yeah, that makes sense.
That require less energy. They'll be less powerful, but then you'll be able to scale back the cost of several other parts. And if you need help choosing the right parts for your build, there are sites like PCPartPicker.com that help show presets for which parts fit together, which sort of part conflicts you might have, and where to find deals on new parts. We have a lot of boxes and a lot of PC parts, so it's best if you unbox them, isolate the parts that you really need, place items into the case, and make sure that they all...
No, you wanna... I would usually do that after installing the motherboard, but I don't know.
Fit, and then start working. And now we're really going to start building by adding the motherboard in.
Adding the motherboard in, has he installed everything else before doing that? Like, you're supposed to install stuff into the motherboard before putting it in.
Notes about installing motherboards: they're really delicate, you should be really careful with them. And screw in with confidence, but also don't screw in too hard, otherwise you could crack the board. I chose Asus's Z370 motherboard for 2 main reasons. One, it has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and also it has support for NVMe SSDs, meaning you can get really fast SSDs that are really easy to install. Pay close attention to the brace that goes out the back of the computer. You always have to make sure that you really
shield,
hammer it in, because there's no screw. It really just has to go outside of the case and clasp onto the frame. And this is very important because otherwise you can't align the motherboard correctly with the holes. We're just going to start installing all 8 screws.
As he said, screw in with confidence.
So next we're going to install the RAM on the motherboard. I chose Corsair's 16GB Vengeance LED RAM for 2 main reasons. One, it has LEDs and we do like lights in our gaming desktops.
Gotta get that RGB.
Secondly, it's pretty fast RAM. It's 2666
megahertz. That's like my RAM's 3600 megahertz, and it's pretty cheap. Like, That's not fast, but okay.
megahertz, I believe, so it's pretty fast, and this motherboard supports that speed, which is most important. Open the slots first, and just aligning the stick with the middle of the strip, not with the end, and just lining that up with the logo. So once you hear that solid clasp and you don't see the gold connectors on the side...
I don't exactly get what he's trying to say. I think he's trying to say that you line the slot with the slot. It's usually, the sticker might be on backwards, so you have to pay attention to the slots, but I don't know.
Anymore, that's when you know the RAM is in. Step 3, we're going to install the hard drive, or in this case, the NVMe SSD. I chose this format of solid-state drive so that I could input it into the motherboard without having to worry about extra wires or putting it in a separate part of the case and just getting really messy.
Hearing what some people have said about it, I haven't watched it before, but yeah, I think you don't need something else to mess up, so good choice on the SSD.
This is from Kingston, and it's 480 gigabytes, so it's not a lot, but you can always upgrade this and swap it out, and it's only held down by one screw and the latch, so it's really simple and really straightforward. Speed for gaming is important when it comes to a hard drive. You want files to write quickly, and you want games to load quickly, so that's why it's best if you use an SSD. Okay, so step 4, we're going to install the graphics card. I chose PNY's GTX 1080, which is overclocked. And so it's a pretty easy installation. That's not a bad choice. You're just going to find the gold connectors.
I think this was a couple years ago.
And you're going to line this bracket with the back end bracket of your PC case. Now,
it's all
which
about brackets
lane you choose
braces.
Depends entirely on what other parts you're going to put in the system. I'm just going to pick the top one because the SSD is at the bottom and I don't want to cover it. I just think it looks nice.
I always put this in last after the power supply and everything else.
Take your remaining brackets.
And after I plug in some cables, but I mean,
you
it might still work, so I think it's fine.
Bolted down by the back end bracket. And your GPU's installed.
Usually you do have to screw it in.
Power supply time. I chose Corsair's 850 watt power supply because I need enough headroom for ray tracing GPUs when they come out, and I don't want to have to upgrade it again. So all you have to do is take the brick and make sure that you align it with these little insulating pads so that the power supply doesn't short circuit and come into contact with the rest of the system. So
it won't short circuit, like they're designed against that, and those pads, they're just to stop vibrations from the fan. But
just take it in, slide it in nice and easy until you have a snug fit, and then shift it to the back.
Also, plug in your cables first before putting it in, otherwise you just, some cases you don't have easy room to access it, but like...
Make sure it's right up against the frame. Now you just take the required screws and you tighten and screw in. So next step, we're going to install the CPU cooler. In this case, it's going to go on the top end of the case, and we're just going to have the hose...
I don't even think he's installed the CPU yet, but I guess CPU cooler, it's time for that.
Hang out for a little while until we install the processor, which is going to come a little later. Always be sure to try to place it in the system first before you install it, because you can see it takes up a lot of space. But in this case,
ooh, that's bad.
No pun intended, it fits in perfectly, and we're going to start screwing it in. And so there's nothing special about this screwing in process. They're just really long screws because they go through the entire frame of the cooler.
Wait a minute, I think he's using the long screws in the box. There's short screws and long screws, usually. Because that should not screw in that far. That'll just go right through the radiator.
And they take forever.
Ugh.
So, next up, cables.
I hope this works.
Every power supply is going to come with a big bag of Velcro cables. It's kind of daunting at first, so you always have to find the ones that are going to fit.
You should...
In this case,
it comes with it. You don't have to come with
those cables with the correct descriptions on the power supply.
And you should have done it before.
Next step is we're connecting the power supply to the motherboard with a 24-pin cable. We're just matching that cable from the motherboard, threading it through the back,
look at that.
And attaching
cable management
to the power supply.
That's
so that
pretty
we can have
terrible.
One of the connections complete. The next few additions will be for the GPU, for any specific ports that the case has, for any lighting that the case has, the CPU cooler, anything else really. We're installing the CPU, the heart of the computer or the brain, depending on how you look at it.
It's about time.
So to do this, we're just going to remove the plastic covering that they put on the motherboard. We're just going to take this little plastic part out. Just toss that out of here.
Keep that.
And
you need that for warranty if you ever need to replace it. And also, if you just install it, it'll pop off automatically. But
and now we have an exposed CPU holder, or rather slot, on the motherboard. And we're going to use the CPU applicator. This is a special little part that not everyone may get, but...
CPU applicator?
But this
Okay.
motherboard that we
I've
got from
never
ASUS
used one of those.
definitely does have. It's called a CPU installation tool. It makes it really useful if you want to install a Core i7 hexa-core CPU. Yeah, we've got one, and it's an 8th generation chip, and it's ready to go.
8th gen.
And it supports overclocking. So
Ooh.
what having this little installer does for you is it's basically a brace that you can apply right to the CPU and light it up with the triangles that you'll see on the bottom
Ugh,
left
that's
corner.
gonna fall out.
And this will make it easier for us to apply it to the motherboard and then apply thermal paste
better
and
not
then
fall
apply
out.
a CPU cooler on top.
Those things are
And
delicate,
we're just gonna
man.
carefully lean it down into the system and make sure that everything lines up, and we're gonna clasp down on it and we'll be good to go.
Oh, let's go back.
And we're gonna clasp down on it and we'll be good to go. And make sure that everything lines up, and we're gonna clasp.
Do you guys see that? Right there, there's a little there's the brace that he uses. He isn't even using it to install. That's funny.
Down on it and we'll be good to go. So we're about to apply thermal paste to the CPU. Every CPU cooler actually comes with a bit of thermal paste already neatly applied in a circle around it, but it's usually not enough. It's good, essentially PC build.
That has a lot on it already. You do not need to add more.
Practice to have a little bit extra.
If you ever need to add scratch thermal paste if there's no on it, you just need to add like a small grain of rice or like a really small pea, but not much more than that.
And layer it on top of the CPU. The final portion.
That's a lot. That should not be that much. It might short out his CPU and then, ugh. Do not do that.
Is to add the CPU cooler to the top end of the processor. So you're gonna see that there are 4
Look how much that is. That's like
brackets, or
20 times how
screws in
much you're
here,
supposed to
brackets
use.
and holders right here. And they're going to keep
Oh
the
yeah,
cooler
the
raised
brackets and braces and holders.
off the processor, but it's also going to be close enough to actually physically come in contact with it, like basically keep it cool. Take thumb screws like this and just screw them on. So now that our internals are done, we're going to put all the panels back on, which is the top glass, side glass, front glass, and of course the back panel where all of this fun stuff is happening.
You didn't show. At this point, he pretty much just goes on rambling about installing Windows in a terrible way, so I just won't bore you with that. The other thing I should tell you is that me and my friend Ethan have been working on a Minecraft server, and we're going to release the IP next week, as well as the mods, all on it next Tuesday, so stay tuned. Other than that, thank you for watching the video. If you liked it, please hit the subscribe button and the like button, and yeah, I'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks.